It happened when I was 15. I had always been prone to getting sick, so when I developed a high fever one evening, it wasn't a complete surprise to my family. But this time was different. The fever wasn't going down, no matter what remedies my parents tried. I could barely sit up, and my entire body felt like it was on fire. Finally, my parents decided to take me to the hospital. The hospital we went to had been built during the 1950s, and its age showed. The walls were stained from years of wear. People often whispered about its eerie reputation. Countless ghost stories had circulated over the years. The doctor decided I needed to be confined for further observation. My hospital room was small and dimly lit, with outdated equipment that looked more at home in a museum than a functioning hospital. A single bulb flickered intermittently in the corner. By the second day, we started to notice that my fever would worsen in the afternoon, and by nighttime, my temperature would spike to nearly 40 degrees Celsius. The doctor couldn't explain why this was happening or identify the cause. The doctor decided to run several tests to figure out what was happening. Blood work and other examinations were done. On the fourth day, I started to notice tall, shadowy figures walking back and forth across the hallway outside my room. At first, I didn't pay it much attention, assuming it was just shadows from the occasional people passing by. But something about it felt off. It moved in a slow, deliberate manner, as though pacing with purpose. That night, I woke up at midnight with a pounding headache from the fever. The room was dimly lit, and the faint hum of the hallway lights filled the silence. Then I noticed it. One of the shadowy figures had stopped and was standing at my door. It was unnaturally tall, its head almost touching the top of the frame, and its body was impossibly thin, as though it had no substance. Its shape was vaguely human, but it was entirely pitch black with no discernible features, no face, no eyes, no clothes. It was like staring into a void of endless darkness, deeper and darker than any shadow I'd ever seen. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, blocking the entrance as though it was watching me. By the fifth day, I began to notice that there were more of them now. These shadowy figures seemed to multiply, appearing not just in the hallway, but in my room as well. Some even followed the doctor and nurses when they came in to check on me. They stood silently in the corners of the room, their tall, thin forms blending into the dim lighting. A few of them were bolder. They came closer, standing just a meter away from my bed. They didn't move or make a sound. They just stood there, utterly still. Despite being featureless and completely pitch black, I could somehow sense a faint, sinister smile on their faceless forms. It was as if the darkness itself was mocking me, smiling at my helplessness. The sight sent chills through my body, but the unrelenting pain from the fever somehow dulled the fear. On the sixth day, my fever had gotten worse, reaching 41 degrees Celsius. I woke up in the middle of the night because of the unbearable pain and heat. It felt like my whole body was on fire. I struggled to breathe, trying to find some relief, but nothing helped. When I opened my eyes, I was shocked. Shadowy figures surrounded my bed, standing so close I could almost touch them. They leaned over me, staring down with their empty faces. The room felt darker than ever, as if their presence had drained all the light. Even though they didn't have eyes or mouths, I could feel them watching me, and somehow, I could tell they were smiling, wide, evil grins that made my stomach churn. The fear was so intense that I forgot about the pain from the fever. I couldn't move, speak, or even cry. It was like I was frozen with fear. But after a few moments, I managed to gather all my strength and swung my fist, hoping to scare them or make them disappear. My punches went straight through them, hitting nothing. They didn't move or react, just stood there with those same awful smiles. My vision blurred, and with one last swing, I blacked out. The next morning, I woke up covered in sweat. But the fever had gone down, and the pain was finally gone. I felt like I could breathe again. The first thing I did was scan the room, my heart racing. But there was nothing there. The figures were gone. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, and for the first time in days, I felt safe. Just happy that it was finally over. Later, the doctors told me I had dengue, and my platelet count had dropped dangerously low. I needed a blood transfusion to survive. Oddly, I didn't feel scared when they told me. Instead, I felt happy, since that would mean that I will be transferred to a new hospital. The thought of dengue wasn't as frightening as what I had been through in that room. A few years after the incident, I slowly started to get over it. I convinced myself that maybe it had all been a product of my fever, that the extreme heat and sickness had caused me to hallucinate. For a while, I even stopped thinking about it altogether. That changed one day when I visited a friend who had been hospitalized. While waiting in the lobby, I struck up a casual conversation with another friend who happened to have his third eye open. Jokingly, I asked him if he could see any ghosts around the hospital. His expression immediately changed, becoming serious. He didn't respond right away, but instead suggested we talk about it after we returned to the office. Back at the office, as soon as we sat down, he wasted no time. He told me that hospitals are filled with entities, spirits that ordinary people can't see. Some are harmless, just wandering aimlessly as if they don't realize they've passed on. Then there are others, darker ones, that carry a deep anger, like they've been consumed by it in death. But the worst of all, he explained, are those you should avoid at any cost if you ever see one. They're the ones that stalk hospitals, lurking in the shadows, searching for those nearing death. He described them in chilling detail. Tall, shadowy figures, completely pitch black, like a void of endless darkness. And then he added the part that sent chills down my spine. They always have that smile, he said, like they're taking pleasure in taking the souls of the dying. Hearing his description felt like being plunged back into that hospital room years ago, surrounded by those same figures. At that moment, I realized that what I saw back then might not have been just a fever-induced nightmare, but a reminder of the dark entities that lingers closer to us than we dare to imagine.